What's going on, guys? It is TZ Champ here, and this is just going to be something different. So I haven't done one of these before, I don't think at all. I've done things similar to this, but this is a Destiny 2 update. As you may know, Lightfall releases literally in like 12 hours. Well, it's more than 12 hours. It's 14, 15 hours, something like that. So Lightfall releases very soon. It releases tomorrow. And Bungie put out a 0-hour Destiny 2 update. 7.001. 7.0.0.1. You get the drift. So this is all the updates that will be going live with Lightfall tomorrow. And there's some huge changes. This update right here is 4,693 words, I believe. So we're gonna skip around a little bit. There's a couple things that I want to touch up on that I think are very important, and I also don't want this video to be an hour long. So we're gonna just kind of skip through a little bit and talk about the big changes. So first things first, Crucible is at the top of the list in the activities, where they're adding some changes to comp. So they're adding an exotic armor swap penalty applied to Trials of Osiris and competitive divisions, where if you equip a different piece of exotic armor, it's going to drain all of your abilities and energy in these modes. So this is for all those like super sweaty, try hard PvP players that'll run certain builds to build up their energy thing and then immediately swap over to like a damage exotic or something for their supers, or something that's going to extend out their supers duration. So now they're no longer able to do that. There was also a bug that caused the quest to autocomplete or auto-claim the rewards. So now they've got that set to where it's not going to do that anymore. And then, of course, also the competitive Rift and Showdown have reduced the revive delay from 1.5 to 2, or to 1.5 from 2, and reduced the respawn to 5.5 from 7. Vanguard operations. So they fixed an issue with one of the heavy things, and then they also made it to where your final score is going to determine your reputation multiplier for the activity completion, making it a lot easier now to rank up in Vanguard ops, and you'll probably be able to rank up a lot faster now too. So the multiplier is going to be 1.0 from under 30,000 points, 7.0 at 250,000 or above. We also tuned the amount of Vanguard rank you will receive for completions, Nightfall quality, and streaks. Full pass on all Vanguard map and mode multipliers with an eye towards balancing score per hour rather than score per attempt. Vanguard and Nightfall strikes added an on-screen health bar for bosses that didn't have them, fixed an issue where players could be given the same objective in quick succession twice. The Vanguard Ops playlist has increased its difficulty, and you can no longer level up beyond the enemy combatants. So a lot of players have been asking for Bungie to make Destiny harder. It has become really easy of a game for a lot of people out there. Not necessarily me, because I've never been like super like big into Destiny and haven't been able to grind that much and stuff. So I wasn't one of the ones that cared about the difficulty increase, but I do think it's going to make the game more fun. And then additional rotating modifiers have been added as well. So the difficulty options have been changed too. Adept is no longer in the game at all. So you can no longer do adept versions of the strikes. So now you can only do hero, legend, and master difficulties. And they've all been reworked for greater challenge and have been reworked to accommodate the new modifiers they're adding as well. So now the level caps are going to be hero is level cap, or it's soft cap plus 20. Legend is the power cap plus 30, and master is the power cap plus 40. And this is supposed to help you. It's going to have a smoother pathway to the Grandmaster when it comes out. So they now feature the ability of the overcharged weapons, which is a new system that they're adding into Destiny, where certain weapons of a specific artifact unlock will be overcharged in those activities. And they've also changed the burns and the singes to surges and threats. But surges do not stack with overcharged weapons, so be sure to remember that. They do not stack for bonus damage. Armor pieces are going to be dropping at higher stat values for the Grasp of Azra's, Duality, and the Spire of the Watcher. So those are going to be really fun to farm for now. And then the UI fixes, they've added a ton of UI fixes, and we've already seen the title screen for Lightfall. It looks super good. It's all over Twitter right now. It's like a purple effect. It looks really, really good. It's probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite, so far that they've ever added. And then, of course, you got the Guardian ranks, orbit screens, a bunch of different tabs that open stuff a lot faster. It's a lot easier to go through. You no longer have to go through like multiple detailed things in order to equip titles and a bunch of things like that. You can track up to 3 Guardian rank rituals at the same time. So we're only going to touch base on this just a little bit. They've also added different spots for collections and waypoints and stuff. So they're making it a lot nicer and a lot nicer looking. Ritual weapons in the tower now have help tooltips describing the core ritual and the reputation, as well as explaining some of the less visible features. So that's a cool thing for the vendors. And then, of course, they got some QOL updates, or QL updates for character screens, clans, rosters, and some other settings. So that's another cool thing. But let's get into the meat of all of it. Let's get into what everybody's really here for. And that's the gameplay and the investment. And one of the biggest ones that I am most excited for is these armor changes that are coming. I have long since been saying in multiple streams that I am ready for Destiny's Armor 3.0. I want better armor. And they're kind of touching on that a little bit. So now armor is no longer going to have an energy type. It's going to basically just be untyped energy, and all mods that use it will be able to, or will use that untyped energy when it's socketed to it. Armor mods that have been previously based on weapon archetypes are now based on weapon damage types. Most armor mods that are based on weapon damage types have also harmonic versions, which is discounted when the weapon's damage type matches your subclass type, which is really cool. Armor mod costs have been generally reduced across the board, which is also cool. The combat style mod socket has been gotten rid of, and it's been replaced on all armor pieces with just an extra socket for the mods associated with that. So like extra helmet slot, gauntlet slot, you know, that kind of thing. They combined the Charged with Light and Elemental Wells armor mods into a new system called Armor Charge, where you'll basically get armor charge stacks, which are basically the same as Charged with Light, every time you pick up an orb of power. And they have ongoing effects, so as long as you have armor charge stacks, you can be granted with different benefits, such as like Font of Wisdom, and it'll cause the stacks to decay every 10 seconds. And you can have up to 3 stacks of charged with or armor charge, and then if you have the charged up mods, which are basically like the bountiful, or not the bountiful wells, I can't remember the name of it, but it was one of the other ones that lets you like increase the maximum number of charges you can have, like with Charged with Light. But the charged up mod will now let you have 6 stacks. Stacks on stacks, I believe, is actually what it was called. So that's pretty awesome. Some redundant mods have been gotten away with since some of their effects overlapped. Some armors now make, with armor mods for finishers, now make use of the armor charge system. Some of the functionality of Elemental Wells have been moved into subclass fragments, which are pretty cool. War mines are gone completely. War mine cells. Seasonal artifact this is another awesome change that I'm so glad that they did, by the way. Unlocking a perk in the seasonal artifact now grants that perk directly to your character when it is relevant. You no longer need to socket an armor mod to gain the effects or the artifact perks effect. That is so good. I am so happy for that. You know how annoying it was to have to set up a whole new like armor mod system just so you could sit there and like change your like different armor mods to make sure that you had like anti-barrier and champion mods and stuff like that. Like, it is so annoying. So I'm so glad they did this. The maximum number of perks that you can unlock, though, has been reduced to 12. So you can no longer unlock every single perk. You actually have to dictate which ones you want. The second column will unlock multiple perks now instead of like just one. Another big one, Artifice Armor, no longer has the bonus socket for seasonal mods, and instead will let you grant any stat +3, which is really cool. So I need to go farm me up some Artifice Armor soon. Adjusted the amount of damage reduction, or provided by Resilience stat. So this is one of their big changes that they were adding to make the game slightly harder. So at tier 10, your reduction is now 30% instead of 40%. And the progression of the damage reduction across all tiers has been smoothed, so it's no longer like spiking at lower tiers, and instead it's kind of just overall just a smooth transition. And then the cost of resilience mods have actually increased to 4 and 2. And I believe before it was 3 and 1. Iron Lord's Pride perk has been added to Iron Banner armor sets. And then some... Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. Exotic armor changes, which are pretty cool. Khepri Sting. True sight is now granted when damaging an enemy with a smoke bomb. Additionally, when you have an undetonated smoke bomb on the battlefield and have not been made invisible by a smoke bomb, you gain significantly increased melee energy generation. Heart of Utmost Light reduced the duration of the empowered ability buffs in PvE to 5 seconds, down from 10 seconds. Reduced the bonus class ability and regeneration while empowered to plus 25% per stack in both PvE and PvP, bringing it down from 150% and 38% respectively. So this was intended to make it harder to get that ×2 empowerment bonus, and as well as reduce the total amount of bonus ability energy provided. And it was to make it a strong ability focused build item, but also make it to where other exotics can be better. You know, the bombardiers are now cause targets to explode, or that are damaged. Cause targets damaged by explosive to become severed. Chromatic Fire works with Strand. Battle Harmony works with Strand. Vettri's Brow Strand. Fellwinter's Strand melees. Claws of Marakara will not provide additional melee charges with Strand subclasses. Armors that support coloration for Strand have been updated, or that support coloration for your subclass type has been updated to support Strand. And weapon. Another big one that everybody's been excited for. The crafting changes. So resonant elements completely removed from the game. Good. Crafting component costs have been replaced with Strand currencies, such as, or standard currencies, not Strand currencies. I'm sorry. Standard currencies, such as Glimmer and Enhancement Cores. So now everybody that's got a huge stockpile of Enhancement Cores, you now have something to do with them. Deep Sight will now only manifest on weapons that have patterns available to unlock, so no more getting useless Deep Sight weapons that you'll never be able to craft. Deep Sight has been removed on existing weapons that do not have patterns, and the Deep Sight Attunement objective has been removed, so you don't have to do the objective anymore. You can just immediately extract or dismantle the weapon to obtain the pattern progress. There's also a bug where the cost was doubled for King's Fall weapons for the Defiance of Yasmin and Smite of Moraine. So that's been fixed. Updated a bunch of VFX things. Restored the correct audio for Field Forged shotguns. Red reticles now enabled on PC. Linear fusion rifles reduced damage versus... So this is some big changes. Linear fusion rifles have reduced damage versus champions, mini-bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 15%, but Sleeper Stimulant and the Queensbreaker did not get affected by that. So that's pretty big. Machine guns now have increased damage by 10% and increased ammo reserves by 50% at 0 inventory stat, 20% at 100 inventory stat. I'm not sure what inventory stat is. I don't know if that's something that's always existed that I just never knew about, but I'm curious to learn what that means. Now, here's the big one. This is what everybody's been wanting or been waiting for. So this been mentioned way before, so everybody kind of already knows what's going on here. I mean, this is not something secret, but this is a big one right here. Heavy grenade launchers have increased damage versus champions, mini-bosses, vehicles by 20%, 40% against miners. Improved projectile collision, making it easier to land hits. Increased the blast radius by 1 meter. And Parasite is unaffected, so that doesn't really matter much. But heavy GLs are getting such a huge buff this year, or for this season. This is going to be the meta, so be on the lookout for some really good heavy grenade launchers as soon as you can. Shotgun's reticles now change in size proportional to the spread angle. The Legend of Acurus is now has its reticle updated to fit more of its large spread angle. Kinetic primary weapons have increased the damage from 1.05 to 1.1, energy from 1.05 to 1.15, and the stasis weapons that are kinetic no longer have their 5% damage bonus. Queenbreaker now uses Arc 3.0 blinds. Shots also chain to multiple nearby targets. Ruinous Effigy, the spear slam attack, is now suppresses enemies. Leviathan's Breath has volatile on perfect draw. Increased damage from 396 to 442, which will allow it to once again one-shot kill all supers in PvP. So to everybody who loved using Leviathan's Breath for that, there you go. It's also got its increased damage versus champions by 30%. 1,000 Voices, new apply with Scorch Stacks for 10 to plus 5. Sunshot does the same thing. Polaris Lance does 40 plus 20. Two-Tailed Fox does 60 plus 30. Prometheus Lens has the incandescent perk now and the catalyst. Grand Overture now uses the arc blind. The Manticore has a hipfire reticle element that shows the current stacks of repulsor. Tractor cannon bug that caused a crash when you fired at stasis crystals has been fixed. The Fourth Horseman now no longer has its 20% damage nerf, which was strange. I didn't even know it had that. And Thunderlord's lightning will no longer disrupt you or your teammates. Some new perks that have been worked on were updated to work with Strand, such as Osmosis, Golden Tricorn, Elemental Capacitor. It just grants airborne effectiveness. Rewind Rounds has been rebuilt to work with non-vaulted glass weapons, which is super cool. Eager Edge got a balance change. I wouldn't call it a nerf, but it is definitely a balance change for sure. No longer deactivates when moving faster than 35 milliseconds, so that's kind of like a good thing. Deactivates correctly after a single melee swing. Yikes. Reduced the base lunge distance slightly and reduced the airborne lunge distance penalty from 25 to 20. But the enhanced version now lets it go back up to 2. Blinding grenades have been renamed to disorienting grenades, so have fun remembering to call them that now. Viced Stinger it used to reload the full magazine, now it only reloads a quarter of it. Zen Moment now applies reduced incoming flinch, and the perk has also been granted branch so the shots of different archetypes ramp up more effectively. So 1 times for the submachine guns, auto rifles, and machine guns, 1.5 pulse sidearms, 2 times for hand cannons and scout rifles. Danger Zone has been updated so that while it's active, it no longer it reduces the self-damage of the weapon. So it's been updated to include that in the description. Wellspring fixed an issue where the perk was not rewarding the correct amount of energy, and it now works with abilities that have multiple charges. So now what it's going to do is every time that, so if you have an ability that has multiple charges, once you fill up that first charge, it's now going to dissipate the amount you receive from Wellspring into the other abilities that are not charged first, and then the least amount of the rest will go into the second charge of the ability that's already charged. And then They fixed the enhanced version of the trait, or they're going to fix it in a future patch, which is sad that they didn't fix it in this one, but oh well. Cascade Point no longer triggers off of non-precision damage. Abilities, rescaled the efficiency or efficacy, however you pronounce that, for the different ability regenerates. In general, tier 10 stat is roughly equivalent to tier 8. So they've decreased the total amount down to about a tier 8, and then they've smoothed the increase to the point to where it doesn't spike heavily anymore, and instead it's more gradual and consistent. Hunter buffs. All right, hunters. I know you're out there. Like literally just 97% of Destiny players are hunter mains. What did they do to you? Are you going to be happy with it? Let's find out. So, for hunters, supers, arc staff, increase the orbs that are generated from 5 to 7. Golden Gun Marksman, 5 to 7. Golden Gun Deadshot, 5 to 7. Spectral Blades, 5 to 7. And also decrease the cooldown to 9:16. Gathering Storm went from 7 to 5. Silence and Squall, 7 to 5. Blade Barrage, 7 to 5. Class abilities, the Marksman Dodge cooldown has been reduced. Gambler's Dodge cooldown reduced as well. Melees, the weighted throwing knife went from 109 to 137. 90 to 100 for the lightweight. Proximity went from 100 to 111. And the Withering Blade went from 113 to 100. So, hunters, right now, let me know in the comments. How do you feel about those? You know, you got nerfed a little bit on some things, and then you got buffed in some other stuff. So, how does it make you feel? Notice it doesn't talk anything about Strand in this as far as ability cooldowns and stuff go. So, that's going to be relatively new information to us that we're going to have to figure out. But Titans, it's your time for some love now. So, for supers, we got Fist of Havoc going from 5 to 7 orbs. And it also increased its PvE damage by 20%, which is pretty crazy. Glacial Quake went from 5 to 7. Hammer of Soul went from 5 to 7 and also decreased its cooldown to 9:16. Burning Maul went from 5 to 7, and Sentinel Shield went from 5 to 7. Thunder Crash, on the other hand, got a huge hit for the most part because it went from 7 to 5. It got reduced the flight time from 5 seconds to 4.5 seconds. Reduced the size of the damaging volume around the player and pushed it further forwards in front of the player to make drive-by disintegrations more intentional. Reduced the detonation size versus players by approximately 20%, unchanged in PvE. Downward vertical influence now begins earlier in the flight. So it's now going to be harder for you to go greater distance in Thunder Crash. So, yikes. They also hit Ward of Dawn. The maximum health went from 13,500 to 8,000. That means that I do believe Dawn Blades will now be able to not only destroy the shield faster, but also still have swords left over, especially with one of the other buffs that are down here. Rescaled the combatant's damage against it, so that way it shouldn't matter that the HP was decreased. They're going to do less damage to it so that it equals out to be about the same. Standardized the damage dealt by each type of kinetic weapon against it. So previously, energy weapons did 2.5 times damage against it, and regular kinetic weapons did 1 point times. Now, both of them are going to do 1.5 times. Armor of Light's been updated as well, because it's super strong in PvP. Basically, as soon as somebody places down a Ward of Dawn, that's it. Like Titan Bubble, you're just stuck there, and then you're just impossible to be killed. And that's because the maximum health was 425. Well, now it's reduced to 300, but you still get a 50% damage resistance. So it kind of equals out there. But it does not negate precision damage anymore. So you can still be precision shot. Melees. Your Ballistic Slam now suppresses the attacking player for 0.9 seconds so that they can't follow up with a melee until they come back into first person. The cooldown was increased to 114. Shield Bash cooldown increased to 114. Seismic Strikes cooldown increased to 101. Hammer Strike was increased to 101. And Shield Toss was reduced to 91. Aspects, so Knockout is been changed. It reduced the damage from 60% to 50% against players. And then the full body melee bonus went from 25 to 20. All right, Titans. So let me know in the comments, how does that make you feel about your nerfs and buffs there? I think they hit you pretty hard on Thunder Crash, not gonna lie. I feel like the Titan bubble was necessary for PvP aspects, because playing comp and playing like control, it was literally impossible to take certain points, especially in comp, because you could just place a Titan bubble on it, and unless you had a Nova Bomb or something that can just destroy the entire thing in one go, there was nothing you could do about it. All right, Warlocks, it's our turn. So overall, spoiler alert, Warlocks didn't have a lot happen to them. Storm Trance orbs went from 5 to 7. Nova Warp 5 to 7. Winter's Wrath 5 to 7. Daybreak 5 to 7. Plus throw cost was reduced from 10%, making it to where you can only throw about 10 like swords more or less, to 6.5 per swing. So you can throw about 12 or 13-ish before you run out. Increased the damage versus PvE by 25%, and the cooldown was reduced to 916 to be even with the others. Chaos Reach went from 7 orbs to 5 orbs. Nova Bomb went from 7 orbs to 5 orbs. Phoenix Dive got a huge buff. The cooldown got reduced from 82 to 55, which is insane, first of all. But on top of that, while Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's cooldown is reduced even more, allowing for rapid reactivations. And while Daybreak is active, Phoenix Dive's detonation damage is increased from 40-80 min max to 100 to 220. And the restoration duration, when activated while Heat Rises is active, increased from 1 second to 3 seconds. Melees got cooldown buffs, or nerfs, I should say. Celestial Fire went up to 112 seconds of cooldown. Incinerator Snap actually got decreased to 83 seconds. And Demonial Blast got decreased to 101 seconds. Aspects, Heat Rises now no longer grants a straight 70 airborne effectiveness when active, and instead it is a passive 20 airborne effectiveness, and on active it gives an extra 50, which is still going to give you the total of 70. It's just now 20 of it's going to be a passive effect. Grenade changes. Arc grenades. Lightning Grenade got an increased cooldown to 152 with a damage buff of 20%. Storm Grenades increased cooldown to 121. And Flux Grenades decreased to 152. Pulse Grenades damage buff by 20%. Solar Grenades, Healing Nades now have an increased cooldown to 91. Trip Mines have an increased cooldown to 121. Solar Grenades have a increased cooldown to 152 plus a 20% damage buff. Thermite Grenades have an increased cooldown of 121 with a 20% damage buff. Incendiary Grenades have a 105 cooldown now, which is decreased from a 121. And for Void, we have Void Spike Grenades that have an increased cooldown of 121 with a 20% damage buff. Void Grenades have Void Wall Grenades, my fault, have an increased cooldown of 152 with a 20% damage buff. Vortex Grenades have a 152 increased cooldown with a 20% damage buff. Magnetic Grenades went from a 121 to a 105, and Scatter Grenades have a 121 to 105 cooldown as well. And for Stasis, the Duskville Grenades went from 64 seconds to 91 seconds. That's a big jump there. So a lot less slowing going to be happening in PvP. Added new elemental pickups for the Void and subclasses. So instead of having elemental wells, They added something called Void Breach and Fire Sprite, which is something new, similar to the Ionic Traces of the Arc classes. So that's going to be the new pickups that you can get. And they added some new fragments and also adjusted some fragments. So Spark of Resistance, you're going to increase nearby enemy count requirement activation from 2 to 3. So that's a little bit of a nerf there. And reduce the linger time from 4 seconds to 2 seconds. Spark of Instinct, when critically wounded, taking damage from enemies, emits a burst of arc damage that jolts targets. Spark of Haste, you'll have greatly increased resilience, recovery, mobility while sprinting. The new solar stuff has Ember of Tempering, where it now creates fire sprites on solar weapon kills. Ember Combustion creates fire sprites on solar detonation or solar super defeats. And now it creates Solar Searing, Ember of Searing, my bad. Now creates fire sprites when defeating scorched targets. Ember of Mercy, which is a new one, when you revive an ally, when you revive an ally, you and other nearby allies gain restoration, and then picking up a solar flare grants restoration as well. Ember of Resolve is new. Solar Grenade Final Blows heal you. For Void, they have the Void or the Echo of Domineering, where it creates Void Breaches when defeating suppressed targets. Echo of Harvest creates Void Breaches when defeating targets with precision damage. Echo of Starvation now grants Devour on pickup of a Void Breach, and it also allows Orb of Power pickup with full super energy. Echo of however you're supposed to pronounce that. Finisher Final Blows create a burst of void damage that make enemies become volatile, and if you defeat them, it's going to create a Void Breach. Echo Vigilance is a new one where defeating a target with when your shields are depleted grants you Void Overshield temporarily. And then, of course, they've made some keyword changes to some of the subclasses. So Arc, for instance, Jolting can now stun Overload champions. Blinding can now stun Unstoppables. Solar Radiant, when you're Radiant, your weapons will now pierce barrier champion shields and stun them. Now, it is quick to note, any weapons that already have barrier or any kind of champion mod rounds to them via artifact mods, intrinsic anti-champion capabilities, or anything like that, it will not stack. So, for instance, if I take Leviathan's Breath, which I believe is an unstoppable bow, and I am Radiant and I shoot a barrier champion, it is not going to go through because the intrinsic version of the intrinsic perk on the bow will take effect over. It'll precede the Radiant effect, basically. Or if I have an artifact mod for Overload submachine guns, and then I use a submachine gun while I'm Radiant, it is not going to go through barriers. So next, Ignition is also able to stun Unstoppables. Volatile rounds will let you pierce barriers with the same description as above. It will not stack on others. Suppression will now stun Overloads. Stasis will stun Overloads. Shatter will stun Unstoppables. And then for combatants, champions now correctly stun even when they're playing another animation, such as a spawn-in. And they noted here that it was a tricky one, so thank you for your patience. We've been asking for this for quite a while. There was such an issue with the stunning. It was ridiculous. There would be some times where they wouldn't stun like they were supposed to, and because there was an animation being played, whether it be like one of their stunned animations or their reload animations or some kind of other animation, they wouldn't stun correctly, and it was a huge problem. And the stun time is now consistent across all champions, so you'll no longer have to worry about slightly different times between combatants being stunned. They should all stun for the same time now. Champions can now be stunned with various element verbs, such as we just talked before. So barrier champions are weak from radiant buff players, volatile rounds, and strand unraveling rounds. So that's quick to note since we're getting strand. Overload champions are weak to arc jolts, void suppressions, and stasis slows. And unstoppable champions are weak to arc blinds, solar ignition, stasis shatter, and strand suspend. So 2 champions are going to be intrinsically affected by strand rounds. So keep that in mind. All subclass finishers can now support the strand coloration, and they've updated the VFX. Emotes, the Ghost Fist Bump emote now supports the strand coloration as well. Power and progression, this is another big one that we're all excited for. Now, hopefully it does pretty good. It's not going to be, super perfect, of course, because they've even said that it's probably going to take them some time to get this right. But this is a step in the correct direction, I would say. So it says on here, weekly powerful rewards have been removed from the throne world and added to Neomuna, which is good. Umbral engrams are no longer used to focus seasonal weapons and armor and will no longer drop from the game. Good. As a result, there will no longer be seasonal umbral energy. Good. Seasonal engrams are a new type of engram. You can visit the seasonal vendor to open them, or you can spend multiple seasonal engrams to focus into a specific weapon or armor. Season focusing is now a separate screen and can be accessed at the vendor by pressing the button next to the upgrades. If you focused Crucible engrams in Season 19 at Shaxx, you will be familiar with this system. So that's really good. I liked that system. Seasonal engrams are stored at the vendor and do not require inventory space, which is amazing. There's a wallet item that you can acquire by visiting the seasonal vendor. Hovering over this item will show you how many engrams you have for each vendor. And if you delete it, you can always reacquire it, which is awesome. And then owners, that's not what I wanted. Owners of a season will now periodically be rewarded seasonal engrams and or seasonal key upon completing activities through the game, which is awesome because they're starting to bring back some of those random rolls and those bonus loot items and stuff to where it actually feels like you're getting something of value for completing seasonal activities. These are known as Defiant engrams and Defiant keys since of the Season of Defiance. The playlist versions will not have a chest at the end. Well, the playlist versions do have a chest at the end. It's the direct launch versions that do not. But if you do not have a seasonal key, when you open that chest, you will receive a seasonal weapon or armor. But if you do have a seasonal key, it will be consumed, and you will receive either a seasonal weapon with deep sight that you have not completed, or a high stat piece of seasonal armor and a seasonal engram, which is super dope. Make sure you open the chest at the end of the activity. Whirlpool's weapons and armor will no longer drop at the end of the seasonal playlists activities, but the direct launch version will have Whirlpool weapons and armor. And then lastly, we're getting into some of the platform and system changes that were made, and they've added support in-game settings for the NVIDIA Reflex, fixed various minor QL issues regarding the controller settings menu on PC. Collision damage is no longer lethal against Guardians. Are you tired of dying to the Architects? Well, no more. They finally removed it, and I'm so happy. I am so happy that they finally did that. Ghost projections that change color based on your subclass now support Strand. And then localization, there's full Mandarin audio localization across Lightfall content. And then they also recasted Ikora for German. So that is it. That is this entire TWAB, basically. The entire update. The 0 hour Destiny 2 dev team. Update 7.0.0.1. It is finally done. Lightfall is coming out literally tomorrow. If you haven't already, dude, get your preload right now. You can. I just finished downloading my preload. I'm ready to game tomorrow as soon as it releases. I hope to be off work early to stream it. So, yeah, that's about it for this video. But if you would like to come see me stream it and stuff, I'll be live, hopefully at the time it launches. And we're hoping to complete the campaign on Legend difficulty, of course. Literally in one sitting and complete it on the first day and see what all we can get into after that. And yeah, guys, so thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments, what is your most anticipated thing about Lightfall? What is the thing that you don't like about Lightfall? What is something that you're skeptical about, or you might be fearful of, or something like? Just let me know in the comments below, because I would love to know. I'm skeptical about a couple things myself, you know. So, but without any further ado, since we're over we're over the 40-minute mark right now, which is crazy. This was a very long update, but I thank you guys so much. Check me out on Twitter. All my links and all my socials and stuff will be in the description down below. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed, if you found this video helpful also. And I hope to see you guys in the next one. Laters.